There is a village in Japan where diabetes doesn't exist. Not low rates, not well-managed, zero. For over 400 years, the people in this village had no word for diabetes. They didn't need one. When researchers finally arrived in 1970, they couldn't find a single case. Not one. In a population where nearly every adult lived past 80 and many past 100, their fasting blood sugar levels looked like those of healthy teenagers. And here's what really got my attention. It wasn't genetics. It wasn't some miracle herb. It wasn't even exercise. It was one single meal pattern. A way of eating so simple, so unremarkable on the surface, that when Western researchers first documented it, they almost overlooked it entirely. Almost. But when you understand what this pattern does inside your cells, specifically to a protein switch called AMPK and a growth pathway called mTOR, you'll understand why the American Diabetes Association has never commissioned a single clinical trial on it. And that's what we're going to uncover tonight. If you believe that you deserve access to real health information, not just what pharmaceutical companies decide is profitable enough to study, I want you to do something for me right now. Subscribe to this channel. Not for me, for you. Because we're building something here. A place where seniors get the truth. And while you're at it, drop a comment. Just 3 words. Type, "I deserve answers." That's it. Let me see how many of us are out there. Now, let me take you to this village. The village is called Ogimi. It sits on the northwestern coast of Okinawa, the southernmost island chain in Japan. Population, just over 3,000 people. You could drive through it in about 4 minutes. There's no hospital, no urgent care clinic. There's a small general store that sells seaweed and vegetables they call longevity food. And it has more centenarians per capita than anywhere else on the planet. 15 people over 100 years old, 171 in their 90s, in a village of 3,000. Think about that for a second. But here's the part that changes everything. In 1970, a researcher named Makoto Suzuki traveled from Tokyo to Okinawa to begin what would become the longest-running centenarian study in history, the Okinawa Centenarian Study. He's now the director of the Okinawa Research Center for Longevity Science. When he arrived, there were no doctors, no hospitals. The villagers didn't know what diabetes was. They had never heard the word. Cardiovascular disease? Essentially absent. Cancer rates? 4 times lower than the national average. And Dr. Suzuki's first reaction, his actual first reaction, was confusion. Because these people weren't doing anything special. They weren't taking supplements. They weren't following a protocol. They weren't reading health books. They were just eating. The way their grandparents ate. The way their great-grandparents ate. The way their families had eaten for centuries. One meal pattern, passed down, never questioned, never studied, until now. Stop for a moment, because I know what you're thinking. Maybe it's genetics. I thought the same thing. Researchers thought the same thing. So let me address that right now, because the answer is fascinating and a little disturbing. When younger Okinawans, the children and grandchildren of these centenarians, abandoned the traditional meal pattern and adopted a westernized diet after World War II, something happened that stunned researchers. Within 1 generation, Okinawa went from having the lowest obesity rate in Japan to the highest. Type 2 diabetes exploded. Cardiovascular deaths surged. The same gene pool, the same island, the same water supply. The only thing that changed was how they ate. Dr. Craig Wilcox, professor of gerontology at Okinawa International University, put it plainly. About 2/3 of their longevity advantage came from diet and lifestyle, not genetics. The genetic piece, that's maybe 1/3, and it mostly matters if you're trying to get past 100. So what was this meal pattern? What were they actually doing? That's what we're getting into next. And I'll be honest with you. When I first read the research, I expected something exotic, something complicated. What I found was the opposite. And that's exactly why it works. The traditional Okinawan meal pattern has 3 components. Not 10, not 7, 3. And every single one of them does something specific, something measurable, inside your body at the cellular level. I'm going to walk you through each one. Not in vague, eat healthy terms. I'm going to show you the exact mechanism, the exact pathway. Because once you understand why this works, you'll never look at your plate the same way again. Component 1. The base. Sweet potato, not rice. Here's something most people don't realize. Unlike mainland Japan, where white rice has been the dietary staple for centuries, the people of Ogimi built their entire diet around sweet potatoes. Not regular potatoes, not yams from the grocery store. Okinawan sweet potatoes. Purple and orange varieties. They called them imo. And for most of their history, sweet potatoes made up 60 to 70% of their total calorie intake. 60 to 70% from one food. Now, here's why that matters, and why it matters specifically for blood sugar. White rice has a glycemic index of around 73 to 89, depending on the variety. That's high. Every time you eat a bowl of white rice, your blood sugar spikes fast, your pancreas dumps insulin, and over decades, those repeated spikes wear down your insulin receptors. That's how type 2 diabetes starts, slowly, silently. Sweet potatoes? The glycemic index is around 54. Some purple varieties test even lower, in the mid-40s. That's a massive difference. But the glycemic index is only half the story. See, the Okinawan purple sweet potato contains something that white rice doesn't. Anthocyanins. These are the compounds that give the flesh its deep purple color. And in 2024, a study published in Helion, that's a peer-reviewed journal under Cell Press, demonstrated something remarkable. Purple sweet potato anthocyanins didn't just lower blood sugar in diabetic mice. They normalized it, brought fasting blood glucose from diabetic levels down to near normal. And, this is the part that made me sit up, they did it in just 10 days. By restoring gut bacteria populations that had been destroyed by the high-fat diet. There's another study, published in Food Chemistry. Researchers in Finland gave healthy men an anthocyanin-rich extract from purple potatoes alongside a standard meal. The result? Significant reduction in both postprandial glucose and insulin, meaning their blood sugar and insulin didn't spike the way they normally would after eating. The mechanism? These anthocyanins inhibit 2 enzymes, alpha-amylase and alpha-glucosidase, which are the enzymes your body uses to break starch down into sugar. When you slow those enzymes down, sugar enters your bloodstream gradually, not all at once. Your pancreas doesn't have to scream for help. And the Okinawans were eating this every single day, for 400 years. But sweet potatoes were just the base, the foundation. Component 2 is where it gets really interesting. Component 2, the protein ratio. Fish, soy, and almost no red meat. The traditional Ogimi meal plate looked nothing like what the average American eats. It was, and I want you to picture this, about 85% plant-based carbohydrates, 9% protein, 6% fat. I know what you're thinking. That's barely any protein. But hold on, stay with me. The protein they did eat came almost entirely from 2 sources: fish and soy. Tofu, miso soup, edamame, fermented soy, and small portions of fish, usually bonito or other local varieties. Red meat was rare. Pork was consumed, but mostly during festivals, not daily. And here's the critical distinction. The total protein wasn't high, but the quality was strategic. Soy protein, specifically, has been studied extensively for its effects on diabetes risk. A major Japanese prospective study, the JACC study, followed over 21,000 healthy adults aged 40 to 79. Women who consumed tofu almost daily had a 33% lower risk of developing type 2 diabetes compared to women who ate it less than 3 times per week. 33%. Now, why does soy do this? Soy isoflavones, particularly genistein and daidzein, improve insulin receptor sensitivity. They help the receptor on the surface of your cells actually respond to insulin again. Think of it like this. If your insulin receptor is a lock, and insulin is the key, what diabetes does is gum up the lock. Soy isoflavones? They clean the lock. But there's something deeper happening here. Something that connects component 1 and component 2 at a molecular level. And it has everything to do with something called mTOR. I'll explain that in a moment. First, component 3. Component 3. Hara hachi, the 8/10ths rule. This is the piece that ties everything together. The Okinawans have a saying. It's a 2,500-year-old Confucian teaching. Before every meal, they remind themselves, Hara hachi. It means, eat until you are 80% full, not stuffed, not satisfied. 80%. You push back from the table while you could still eat more. Every meal, every day, for your entire life. Now, this sounds simple, almost too simple, the kind of thing you'd read in a wellness magazine and forget about. But when researchers at the Okinawa Research Center for Longevity Science actually quantified what this practice does, the findings were staggering. They estimated that traditional Okinawans consumed 10 to 15% fewer calories than what standard nutritional guidelines recommend. Not dramatically less, not starvation, just a consistent, moderate caloric gap, every single day, for decades. And that gap, that 10 to 15%, activates something inside your cells that most doctors will never explain to you. All right, this is the part of the video where I need you to really pay attention. Because what I'm about to explain, this is the mechanism. This is why it works. And once you understand this, you'll understand why the American Diabetes Association has spent billions studying drugs and $0 studying this meal pattern. Inside every cell in your body, there's a molecular switch. It's called AMPK, adenosine monophosphate activated protein kinase. Complicated name, simple concept. Think of AMPK as your cell's fuel gauge. When your cells have plenty of energy, when you just ate a big meal, when glucose is flooding in, AMPK is quiet. It sits back. It lets another system take over. That system is called mTOR, mechanistic target of rapamycin. And mTOR's job is growth, cell growth, fat storage, protein synthesis, building. Now, mTOR isn't bad. You need it. But here's the problem. In the average American senior, eating 3 full meals a day, plus snacks, plus dessert, mTOR is active almost constantly, all day long. Your cells are always in build and store mode. And when mTOR is chronically overactive, it does 3 things that directly cause type 2 diabetes. 1. It reduces insulin receptor sensitivity. Your cells stop responding to insulin as effectively. 2. It promotes fat storage, particularly visceral fat, the fat around your organs that drives inflammation. 3. It suppresses autophagy, which is your body's cellular cleanup system, the process that removes damaged proteins and dysfunctional cell parts. When autophagy shuts down, damaged cells accumulate, inflammation rises, and your metabolic system starts to break. This is published science. A study in the journal Diabetes demonstrated that AMPK activation is the critical mediator of how caloric restriction improves insulin sensitivity in skeletal muscle. When the researchers knocked out the AMPK gene in mice, caloric restriction stopped working. Completely. The blood sugar benefits disappeared. That's how important this switch is. Now, here's what happens in the Okinawan meal pattern. When you eat until 80% full, consistently, day after day, your cells experience a mild energy deficit. Not starvation, not deprivation, a gap. And that gap triggers AMPK activation. And when AMPK turns on, it does the opposite of everything mTOR does. AMPK improves insulin receptor sensitivity. It promotes fat oxidation, burning fat for fuel instead of storing it. It activates autophagy, cleaning out the cellular garbage. It suppresses chronic inflammation. And it activates something called FOXO3, the longevity gene, which Okinawan centenarians carry at significantly higher rates than the general population. Dr. Craig Wilcox confirmed this directly. He said that many of the traditional Okinawan foods turn on FOXO3, which slows telomere shortening and reduces inflammation. So let me put this together for you. Sweet potatoes with a low glycemic index prevent the blood sugar spikes that chronically activate mTOR. Soy-based proteins with isoflavones directly improve insulin receptor sensitivity. And Hara hachi, eating to 80%, creates the mild caloric gap that activates AMPK and suppresses mTOR. All three components, working together, every meal, every day, for 400 years. No pills, no injections, no prescriptions, no copays. And that brings us to the question I promised I would answer. Here's where I need to be careful with my words, because I'm not going to make accusations I can't support. But I am going to show you facts, and I'm going to let you draw your own conclusions. The American Diabetes Association is one of the most powerful health organizations in the world. They set the dietary guidelines that your doctor follows. They determine what research gets funded. They influence what gets taught in medical school. And they have never, not once, commissioned a randomized clinical trial on the traditional Okinawan meal pattern. Not on Hara hachi, not on sweet potato-based diets for blood sugar control. Not on the combination of low glycemic load plus moderate caloric restriction plus soy-based protein. Now, you might say, well, maybe it's too hard to study. Fair point. Let's look at what they have studied. The ADA has funded trials on metformin, on GLP-1 receptor agonists, on SGLT2 inhibitors, on continuous glucose monitors, on bariatric surgery, on pharmaceutical interventions that cost, on average, between $300 and $1,200 per month per patient. The Okinawan meal pattern costs approximately $2 to $4 a day. Do you see the problem? There's no patent on sweet potatoes. There's no licensing fee for Hara hachi. There's no pharmaceutical company that can generate revenue from telling you to eat until 80% full. No device manufacturer profits from telling you to replace white rice with purple sweet potato. And here's the thing that really bothers me. The research already exists. The Okinawa Centenarian study has been running since 1975. Over 1,000 centenarians examined. Decades of data on diet, biomarkers, and disease rates. Published in the Journal of the American College of Nutrition. Published in Mechanisms of Aging and Development. Published in Gerontology. The evidence is sitting right there, in peer-reviewed journals. With PubMed identifiers you can look up tonight. But when you open the ADA's official dietary guidelines, what do you find? Recommendations built around medication management, carbohydrate counting, pharmaceutical intervention timelines. You won't find a single reference to the Okinawan dietary model. Now, I want to be fair. The ADA does important work. They fund research that saves lives. Medications like metformin have helped millions of people. I am not saying abandon your medication. Do not do that. But I am saying that a meal pattern that produced zero diabetes for 400 years deserves more than silence. If you agree, type "study the food" in the comments. Let's see how many of us feel the same way. Okay, so you're probably thinking, I don't live in Okinawa. I can't get those specific sweet potatoes. I'm not going to learn a Confucian mantra before every meal. I get it. So let me translate this into something practical. Something you can start this week. Using foods you can buy at any American grocery store. Here's the adaptation. And I've broken it into 3 shifts, not a full diet overhaul. 3 shifts. Shift 1. Replace 1 starch per day with sweet potato. You don't have to replace everything. Start with 1 meal. If you're eating white rice at dinner, swap it for a baked or steamed sweet potato. Orange or purple. Purple is better if you can find it, but orange works. Key detail, and this matters a lot. How you cook it changes the glycemic impact. Boiled or steamed sweet potatoes have a significantly lower glycemic response than baked or fried. Baking breaks down more starch into simple sugars. And here's a trick the research supports. Cook your sweet potatoes, then refrigerate them overnight before eating. When starch cools, it forms something called resistant starch. Resistant starch passes through your small intestine without being digested. It feeds your beneficial gut bacteria instead of spiking your blood sugar. Same food, same calories, different metabolic effect, just because you let it cool down. One sweet potato, one meal, every day. That's shift 1. Shift 2. Add a daily soy source. This one's easy. You're not replacing anything. You're adding. 1 serving of tofu, or a cup of miso soup, or half a cup of edamame. Pick whichever one you actually enjoy. The JACC study found the diabetes protection was strongest with daily tofu consumption. But any fermented or whole soy source provides the isoflavones that improve insulin receptor function. Important note, I said soy, not soy protein isolate, not soy supplements, not processed soy burgers with 14 ingredients. Whole soy foods, the way the Okinawans ate them. Simple, minimally processed. If you're on thyroid medication, talk to your doctor first. Soy can interact with thyroid hormone absorption if eaten at the same time as your medication. But the fix is simple. Just separate them by a few hours. That's shift 2. Shift 3. Practice the 80% rule. This is the hardest one. Not because it's complicated, because it requires you to fight a habit you've had your entire life. Most Americans eat until they feel full. That's 100%. Sometimes 110. The Okinawan practice is to stop at 80%, consistently. Here's how to actually do this. First, eat slower. Put your fork down between bites. It takes roughly 20 minutes for your brain to register satiety from your stomach. If you finish a meal in 8 minutes, you've already overeaten before your brain catches up. Second, use a smaller plate. Sounds trivial. It's not. Research consistently shows that plate size affects portion size, which affects calorie intake without the person consciously noticing. Third, after you've eaten what feels like enough, wait 10 minutes before getting more. Just 10 minutes. If you're still hungry after 10 minutes, eat a small amount more. Most of the time, you won't be. You're not starving yourself. You're creating a 10 to 15% caloric gap, the same gap that activates AMPK, the same gap that suppresses mTOR, the same gap that kept an entire village diabetes-free for 4 centuries. Now, before you rush off and start all 3 of these tomorrow, there are mistakes people make when they try to copy this pattern, and some of these mistakes can actually cancel the benefits entirely. This next part is critical. I see this happen constantly. Someone learns about a healthy eating pattern, gets excited, implements it wrong, and then wonders why it didn't work. So let me save you the frustration. Mistake 1. Eating sweet potato with a high sugar topping. You baked a sweet potato. Great. Then you loaded it with brown sugar, marshmallows, maple syrup, or honey. You just destroyed the glycemic advantage. The whole point of the sweet potato was its moderate glycemic index. When you pour sugar on top, you turn a blood sugar stabilizing food into a dessert. Your pancreas doesn't know the sugar came from a healthy base. Sugar is sugar. The Okinawans ate their sweet potatoes plain, steamed, sometimes with a little miso or turmeric. That's it. If you need flavor, try cinnamon. Cinnamon has actually been shown in some studies to support insulin sensitivity. Or use a small amount of miso paste. But the moment you add sweetener, you've canceled the mechanism. Mistake 2. Practicing the 80% rule at dinner, but snacking all day. Hara hachi doesn't work if you eat to 80% at meals, and then graze on crackers, granola bars, and processed snacks between meals. The entire point of the caloric gap is that your cells spend meaningful time in that low-energy state where AMPK activates. If you're constantly eating, even small amounts, mTOR stays active. AMPK never fully engages. The traditional Okinawans ate structured meals. They didn't snack. The concept of eating between meals barely existed in their culture. This isn't about willpower, it's about giving your cellular machinery time to switch modes. If you're hungry between meals, drink green tea. The Okinawans drank jasmine tea and green tea throughout the day. Green tea contains EGCG, epigallocatechin gallate, which actually supports AMPK activation and has its own modest blood sugar benefits. It bridges the gap without breaking the mechanism. Mistake 3. Combining soy with calcium supplements at the same time. This is a subtle one, but it matters. Soy isoflavones, the compounds responsible for improving insulin receptor sensitivity, can have their absorption reduced when taken with high doses of calcium. Some research suggests calcium competes with isoflavone absorption in the gut. If you take calcium supplements, don't take them at the same meal where you eat your soy. Separate them by at least 2 to 3 hours. This preserves the insulin-sensitizing benefit of the soy without sacrificing your bone health. The Okinawans got their calcium primarily from leafy greens, small fish eaten with bones, and seaweed, not from supplements. Their calcium intake was spread throughout the day in food form, not concentrated in a single pill. Mistake 4. Thinking this works overnight. The Okinawans didn't eat this way for 2 weeks and declare victory. This was a lifelong pattern. The benefits, the AMPK activation, the insulin receptor repair, the mTOR suppression, these are cumulative. They build over weeks, months, and years. If you try this for 5 days and check your fasting glucose and it hasn't budged, don't quit. You're asking your cells to reverse decades of metabolic damage. Give it time. 90 days minimum before you assess meaningful change in HbA1c. That's about the lifespan of a red blood cell, which is what the HbA1c test actually measures. Consistency beats intensity. Every time. Let me bring this full circle. There's a stone marker in the village of Ogimi. It's old, weathered, and carved into it, in Japanese, are words that roughly translate to this. At 80, you are merely a youth. At 90, if your ancestors invite you into heaven, ask them to wait until you are 100. Then you might consider it. That's not poetry. That's what they actually believe. Because in that village, living to 100 isn't remarkable. It's expected. And the foundation of that expectation is one meal pattern. Sweet potatoes instead of processed starches. Soy-based protein instead of inflammatory red meat. And the discipline to push back from the table, while you still could eat more. No patents, no prescriptions, no monthly copays, no insurance pre-authorizations. Just food, prepared simply, eaten wisely. For 400 years. The American Diabetes Association may never study it. Your doctor may never mention it. But now you know. And knowledge, that's the one thing nobody can bill you for. If this video changed the way you think about food and blood sugar, share it. Send it to someone you care about. Someone over 65 who deserves to hear this. Because the people who profit from keeping you medicated, they won't share it for you. And if you want to go deeper, I have another video that breaks down exactly which foods spike your blood sugar in ways you'd never expect, including 3 healthy foods that are actually worse than candy for seniors. I'll put the link right here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for trusting this channel with your health. Watch the next video.